The radical, fundamental principle.
Give me just a moment, we're almost there. Sorry about this.
The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody, and welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Friday night. Again, sorry for the technical issues, but ultimately the cause is a good thing, good development. I've massively ramped up the RAM on my Mac, so we should not have any more issues, technical issues. We will see. We will see. Everything should be stable. Video should be beautiful. Everything should be amazing. But the problem was that, I guess because they putzed around with replacing the RAM and bringing it back, once I reconnected everything, we had to redo all the settings. So now that all the settings are redone, everything is smooth. For some reason, the only thing we don't have is Facebook. We can get Facebook running just in a second here, and once Facebook is running, we're all good. But overall, it's let me just get this going, and then it'll take 2 seconds to get Facebook going. Okay, we have to switch this to that, and then let's see there, and I think we can do this, and then that, and I think we'll be ready to rock and roll here. Here we go. Go live. All right. Whoops. Go live without a title. That's fine. All right. So welcome everybody again, and now we have Facebook, and everything's running. Oh, congratulations to me, or really congratulations to all of you, because I couldn't have done this without your help. But yes, we broke 20,000 subscribers today. Like, I don't know, 6 weeks ahead of schedule. I think it's 6 weeks ahead of schedule. I thought maybe optimistically we'd get there by the end of July, but we basically got 500 or so subscriptions in the last 48 hours, or maybe a little bit more, maybe 54, 56 hours. 20,000 subscribers just like that in the last 3 days. I mean, it looked earlier in the week that we were going to get it really first week of July, that it was going to happen in July for certain, no question. And then what really happened, and some of you might be interested in this, but what really happened is beyond the fact that we've been asking you to subscribe and asking you to promote, and thank you for all of you who've done that, and that has spurred incredible amounts of subscriptions all month. But on the day before yesterday, an interview I had done with George Gammon went live, and George has a big following, 200,000 or so, and I get a lot of libertarian types, and I guess they had not subscribed to my channel, didn't know maybe who I was, I don't know, but suddenly, bam, subscriptions shot up as soon as that interview went up. It continued to go up yesterday, continued to go up today. So yes, it's been a good week. Subscriptions way up. I've noticed some additional supporters signing up for support on yaronbrookshow.com/support, even on Patreon, Subscribestar. Local seems to be picking up. So generally, activity is going up, and I attribute it to a few things. One is, I did an interview with somebody who's influential, which is great, and his audience was a good audience for this. Not everybody's audience is. Interestingly enough, when I did Shapiro, I didn't get a big uptick in subscribers and in support and stuff, which is interesting. The biggest I've ever got was Dave Rubin, and then now Yaron was quite big. So great. We just need to keep plugging along, keep doing more and more interviews, keep expanding the scope. When I did stuff with Gad Saad, we got a lot. So hopefully we can get God on the show again, and maybe I'll be on his show sometime. We just need to keep broadening the universe that we talk to. Peter Schiff. I don't think Peter Schiff has guests. I don't like inviting people on my show who I disagree with, because I feel like I'm inviting somebody on my show to argue with them. So anyway, I might have Peter Schiff on the show. We'll see. He's going to JRE. I don't know what JRE is. Yes, but Peter Schiff would be great. Anyway, thank you. Thank you for all the new subscribers. Thank you for those of you who help promote the show. Thank you for those who support the show. Thank you for those who are going to support the show. All good, all fantastic. I will have Gad Saad. I think he's got a new book coming out, or is out, and I'll definitely have him on for that. Maybe we can have Dave Rubin on the show, since he's not, maybe he'll come on the show sometime soon. Joe Rogan. So Peter Schiff is going on Joe Rogan on July 14th. Yeah, Joe Rogan Experience has Peter Schiff. For some reason, will not have me. So I don't know. It's something personal, or what it is exactly. All right, what do we? Anything else I need to catch you guys up on? Anything else going on? Tomorrow we've got a kind of Q&A session, so I'll be taking questions live from basically by phone or by Zoom from those who have contributed $25 or more to the Yaron Brook Show a month. So $25 donors. So if you want to be able to ask me questions live via audio, you can do so by contributing $25 or more a month. If you want to ask me via video live, you can do so by contributing $100 or more a month. We did that last weekend. So that'll be tomorrow. We'll also be doing, of course, Super Chat tomorrow. So open Q&A tomorrow at 8 p.m. That's Saturday, 8 p.m. tomorrow. Both on Zoom and from you live on Super Chat. So feel free to engage and participate. That'll be fun. Other than that, we'll see. We'll probably have some guests on next week. In the next few weeks, probably have Onkar Gate on to talk about his essay on the coronavirus and the lockdowns. And it looks like I'm going to have Andy Bernstein on to talk about politics and things we might disagree about in politics. We'll see. We'll see if what exactly, how that exactly turns out. But yeah, so I'm excited. 20,000. Of course, 20,000 is nothing in the big scheme of things. We got to get up to 1 million, and one day we will. Let's go now for 50 and 100,000. Those are the next milestones. So more than double, 5x where we are right now. That should be the goal, and part of that will be, all of that will be through your effort through sharing and through liking, and of course, which helps with the algorithms, and then of you on social media, using your social media platforms to encourage people to subscribe to the show. So. All right, somebody says, if I hit 50,000, Derek says, if I hit 50,000, I promise to do a 3-hour show. Sure. I'll do more than one 3-hour show if I hit 50,000. So the day I hit 50,000, the week I did 50,000, I will do at least one 3-hour show for any, of course, nobody's going to stay for 3 hours, right? Everybody wants a 3-hour show. Like Jonathan Honing always tells me, I want a 3-hour show, but come about an hour 15, he's out of there. He's out. So anyway, just fun. So yes, I'll do a 3-hour show if we hit 50,000. I'll have to practice and get my stamina up so I can get up to those numbers. All right. So let's see, before we get to a topic, let's just take this one. Why do you think conservatives that follow Shapiro are not receptive to free market message? Has it anything to do with their religious bent? Yeah, I think so. If you look at the comment section with Shapiro, a lot of it had to do with religion and with, that's weird, and with religious issues, and then with, what would you say, issues related to ethics, right? So they take their ethics seriously. And for them, this whole question of ethics, of self-interest, of altruism, and our condemnation of altruism, that goes to the heart of what their religion is all about. And they reject objectivism. They're not open to the ideas because of that. And of course, religion also, and altruism in particular, also, you know, whatever support you have for free markets is undercut by altruism. Altruism is incompatible with free markets, as I think I explained on Ben Shapiro's show, but they don't want it, right? They want to believe they're pro-free markets, but they won't take it all the way, and they won't take it all the way because of their altruism, and their altruism is what they're not willing to give up because it's so tied up with their religion. You know, altruism is the religious morality. There is no Christianity without altruism. So I think that's the big barrier. The big barrier is, without a question, religion and altruism. And with libertarians, they don't seem to care that much as long as you're free markets. But, and then with kind of left of center, more rational leftists, they've already bought it. They've already rejected religion. They're willing to reject a lot of other things. They're much more open to new ideas, I think. And that's why I think I think my most interesting audience at the end of the day is what used to be the Dave Rubin audience. I'm not sure that's his audience anymore, but what used to be his audience, that is the audience of people pro-reason, pro-science, pro-reason, pro-science leftists, pro-free speech leftists, that combination. Science, reason, free speech. And there are quite a few of those on the left. So that, I think, is, I mean, fewer and fewer, unfortunately. The left is being more and more dominated by the complete crazies. But, you know, classical liberals of basically tilting left and right, or I think the best audience. Somebody asked, yeah, I'm tempted to answer all the Super Chat questions, but I've got to get to the topic. Okay, so we'll get to these Super Chat questions. Let's go to the topic. So the topic is, why is everything political? And everything is political now. From sex to economics, to what's true in economics, to what works in economics, to trade, to science, all kinds of science, from climate to diseases, to evolution, to a whole array of other scientific issues. Monuments, wages, again, wages, dividends, share buybacks for banks, that's become a political issue. History, education, almost everything, everything. You know, when I look through the news, it's like all these issues that we take political stance on. That there's a difference between how you approach them from the left and how you approach them from the right. That Republicans, Democrats have different positions on. And the government is debating and discussing. And this is all really, well, I think the volume's way too high. Let me reduce it. I think this is all a consequence of, and let me know if the volume is off now. I think it was way too high before. Let me know if it's good. I think this is all a consequence of the mixed economy. What does the mixed economy represent? Or what does it mean? Let me put it this way. What does it mean to say everything's political? Well, it's not just that now politicians debate it. It's not just that it's political parties and people who support political parties have different points of view about it. It's that the state now is involved in it. And if the state is involved in it, what does that mean? Well, it means the gun is involved in it. It means force is involved in it. It means coercion is involved in it. And that's why we should be concerned about things being politicized. It takes them out of the realm of the voluntary, out of the realm of the transactional, and into the realm of force, into the realm of coercion, into the realm of authority, dictating what you should and shouldn't do. So what it means to politicize something is to bring force to the table. It means to bring government to the table, which is force. Now, when is force appropriate? When is it appropriate for government to be involved? Well, in the American form of government, and in the proper form of government, it is only appropriate for the government to be involved when rights are being violated. The only role of government, and therefore the only role of force, no, the other way around, the only role of force, and therefore the only role of government, is to be used in self-defense. The role of government is to protect us. It's to defend us. It's to find the bad guys and retaliate against them. It's to engage in the world when our rights are being threatened, when force is being applied on us. And when our rights are being threatened, the only appropriate response in those circumstances is force. The only way to combat force is with force. One doesn't negotiate with evil. One doesn't compromise with evil. If somebody is violating your rights, you don't say, well, okay, take half. They must be stopped. This is why prison, right? Why we have policemen with guns, why we have a government. We have a government to be the monopoly over the use of retaliatory or force in self-defense. But what happens in a mixed economy? In a mixed economy, government is now not just relegated to protecting rights. Government now is supposed to make sure the economy grows. Government now is supposed to ensure that people have a, quote, living wage. Government is now responsible for there not to be too high unemployment. Government is now responsible for monuments, building them, preserving them, keeping them. Government is now responsible for maintaining huge, vast lands all over the country. Government is now responsible for deciding who can get married and who cannot get married. Government is now responsible for having public bathrooms and therefore who can go into those bathrooms and who can't go into those bathrooms. Government is now responsible for trade and therefore who you can buy stuff from and who you can't buy stuff from. And how much you should pay for it. Call that tariffs. Government is now responsible for education. So what should be taught in schools and what shouldn't be taught in schools. Government is now responsible for your retirement, so how to structure Social Security or Medicare, and God forbid if you lose money in your 401k. So government is now feels responsible for the state of the stock market, the bond market, and everything else. You see, once government abandons its sole responsibility, or not abandons, but expands its responsibility beyond the protection of individual rights, it is now involved in every aspect of our life, and there's no limiting. What's the limiting factor? What would we say, no, government shouldn't be here? If it's in education, if it's in the economy, in every aspect of the economy, if it's in our sex lives, if it's in science, then where isn't it? What is the criteria? What is the standard? What is the principle that would exclude them from a particular area? So government continues continuously expands into more and more and more of our life. And as it expands into more and more of our life, it brings the gun, it brings force into that portion of our life. When government starts funding science, then it gets to decide which science, which gives it a lot of power over the science that gets done. And now, instead of the science getting done based on people who are funding its interests, based on the interests of scientists, now the funding gets done for political motivation, for political reasons. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, put aside what you actually think of the global warming hysteria, that, you know, that if you a scientist and applying for government grants, and you do a study, and at the end of the study, you write back to whoever funded you, and you say, everything's great, things are good, there's no crisis, life on planet Earth is pretty wonderful. There's no political reason to give you money again, right? There's nothing to be learned from that. There's nothing to be gained by you saying things are good. But if you come back and say, you know, the world might be ending, but if I get more money, I'll be able to dig a little deeper into exactly how it's going to end and when it's going to end and what you, the politician, can do about it, how you can apply your gun to stop ending it, then they get more money. So you politicize the process because government now can manipulate science based on a political agenda. It can fund the science it likes and not fund the science it doesn't like based on other issues that have nothing to do with science. For example, on the left, it's a hatred of man's ability to exploit the environment. And the fact that they place an intrinsic value on nature and on the environment. And if you produce science that supports that agenda, great, you're going to get funding. But if there's a Republican administration, then no, you're not going to get funding. I mean, I wish that were true, but Republicans cave on all this, so the left lands up setting the entire agenda. Or if you're doing stem cell research on embryonic stem cells, by all measures, it seems like the most effective stem cells, then if it's a Republican administration, no, because there's a religious prohibition on that, I guess, and then they won't fund it. The Democrats will fund it. But see, now, the science become motivated by the politics. But if government isn't funding science, science is unlikely to get politicized in that sense. And the government can't ban. The government can ban science. Private sector can't ban it. It can decide not to fund it, but it can't ban it. So if the government doesn't like stem cell research, it doesn't just not fund it, it can actually ban the research, as they did under the Bush administration. So what the government being involved in all these aspects turns it now into what is approved, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what's okay, what is not okay. And then on top of that, they have the power to use a gun to ban it completely and to fund it. What they fund and what they don't fund. So the mixed economy allows the government to enter every one of these fields. And once it enters them, it has an agenda. There's a purpose for it. Certain science is consistent with some political agendas, and other science is inconsistent with some political agendas. And the truth becomes irrelevant. The truth is not important when it comes to politics. What's important when it comes to politics is power, not truth. It's what gets you votes. It's what supports your particular agenda, what appeases your voters. what makes you feel strong and powerful, depending on the particular politicians. So there is a whole, every time you allow the government to step into a new region, right? But think about what happens when the government steps out. Imagine a world in which government didn't have a position on marriage, a government that didn't have a position on science, didn't fund science, didn't get involved in science, and used science only in the protection of individual rights. So, for example, when it comes to an infectious disease, science becomes important. But even now, even when it's appropriate for the government to be engaged in science, in evaluating science, for example, when it comes to an infectious disease, that has become completely and utterly politicized. Because we're so used to everything being politicized, everything having a left-right, that people are uninterested in the truth anymore. It's who's advocating for it. It doesn't matter if a particular drug is good or bad. It matters whether Trump likes it or not. The biggest one right now for me is just unbelievable to me. Why are masks politicized? What is it about wearing masks that represents a particular point of view? Well, other than Trump won't wear a mask. But other than the fact that Trump won't wear a mask, why does that mean that people who wear masks are Democrats and people who don't are Republicans, or people who wear masks are wimps and people who don't wear masks are real men? How did this become a question of what tribe you belong to, or what view you have on the world, on religion, on capitalism, on, I don't know, on Republicans, Democrats? Isn't whether you should wear a mask or not a purely scientific question? Isn't it an issue of fact? I mean, you'd almost say it's an issue of common sense, right? But beyond the fact that people are so tribal that they don't care about the truth anymore, which is true, and I've talked about it many times, it's the fact that people now are it's so ingrained in them that everything is motivated by politics. So, for example, the people on the right say, well, we know global warming is wrong. Scientists claim it, and it's a Democratic agenda item, and therefore we don't believe scientists anymore about anything, because everything scientists say is a Democratic agenda item, so we're going to turn away all science in the name of it's a political agenda item. And of course, this is the danger when you take something like global warming out of context and you make it political, that you turn people off of science. Of course, the left has a similar approach to Republicans. They say, you don't believe in evolution. You guys are anti-science inherently. So we don't trust anything you say about science. And if you don't believe in evolution, then you can't be trusted with any scientific conclusion. And again, it becomes tribal, it becomes politicized, it becomes warring factions. I mean, the stuff right now about masks, I mean, it's nasty out there. People hate each other. People are shaming each other, pro and anti-masks. I mean, it's absurd. It's not really difficult to figure out that masks in a indoor setting make complete and utter sense. And it's not that hard to figure out that cultures where they wear a lot of masks, like Asia, have dealt far better with this virus than cultures that haven't worn masks. Maybe masks matter. What have you got to lose by wearing a mask every time you walk into a store or into a crowded area? Masks outdoors, particularly if it's not crowded, probably are meaningless. As long as there's a breeze or wind or something, doesn't really mean anything. Probably not required, probably overkill. But what's the big deal about wearing a mask indoors? How can that hurt anybody? Other than you're trying to make a political point. And yeah, the government shouldn't force us to wear masks, but they force us to do a gazillion things. They force you to pay taxes, you still pay it. So just because the government is forcing you, you're going to take, your health or other people's health and not care about it because the government is forcing it. You don't like masks, fine, but the fact is that they protect you. And if they protect you even a little bit, why isn't it not worth it? Right? So we become so obsessed, and it's not about it's uncomfortable and so on. Yeah, I don't like wearing a mask. I wear it into a store, and as soon as I get out, I take it off. As soon as I'm outdoors, I don't wear a mask. But indoors, I'm dreading the fact that I'm going to fly to California and I'm going to have to wear a mask the whole trip. But you know what? The airline wants me to wear a mask the whole trip. That's the standards they've set. Okay, I'd rather fly with a mask than not be able to fly. And yes, and it's because science has been so distorted for political purposes. Whether it's global warming or on the right, whether it's so-called race realism, they distort, pervert, make up, invent science in quotes, in order to justify a political agenda. So now we think all science is a political agenda. And now we divide on everything, or take the monuments. Why is the monuments a political issue? Why are the monuments a political issue? Not tearing them down. Of course, tearing them down is a violation of the rule of law, and people who tear down monuments, who destroy property, should be prosecuted and put in jail. But why is the issue a political issue? Is anybody out there, left or right? I mean, other than the racist. Put aside the racist. Again, they've showed up on my stream. But other than the racists, who thinks that it's a good idea to celebrate slavery? Other than the racists, why should Republicans support the celebration of those who fought to preserve slavery? Those who risked their lives and the lives of hundreds of thousands of young men to defend slavery. And if nobody thinks that, then why isn't there consensus among Republicans and among pretty much everybody that the monuments to those who protected slavery should be taken down in a, lawful, systematic, put in museums way? Now, note that even the monuments thing is a consequence of a mixed economy. It becomes politicized because the government owns the land. The government puts up monuments. And once the government does that, and one group is anti the monuments, then it becomes an issue of, well, my group has to therefore be for the monuments. Put aside facts, put aside what I actually think, put aside thinking. It's your group versus my group. But if this was private property, then if I wanted to put up a statue of some horrific person, like, I don't know, Lenin or something like that, like there are private statues of Lenin in the United States, well, it's private property and you can't destroy it. But if it's public property, it's political. It's who gets to decide which statues goes up where, who gets to be celebrated, who doesn't get to be celebrated. Why is it anybody's business who marries whom? Why is it the government's business? Why does force have to enter the equation? Isn't this just a contract? It's because the government, as a mixed economy government does, instead of protecting rights, has now put itself into the role of deciding what exactly in its minutest detail that contract has to look like. It could spell out principles without having, so we'd have a standard contract for marriage, without having to define who marries whom. Why does the government own bathrooms? If it didn't own bathrooms, then the transgender thing, again, would go away. Put aside the non-discrimination laws that, again, are a form of mixed economy. Why is the government deciding who can discriminate against whom, under what circumstances, and for what? It's okay to discriminate ideas, but it's not okay to discriminate skin color. It's not okay to discriminate sexual orientation or whatever. Why is that the government's job to decide these things? It's not. And as soon as the government gets into that business, it becomes super politicized. See the Supreme Court decision on discrimination on gays and trans. It's not the government's job to decide who marries, to decide who gets to use bathrooms, to decide what is a man and what is a woman. I mean, there might be a context in which that's necessary for protecting rights, but that's a very delimited concept. The problem is that the government has reached way beyond protecting rights into every aspect of our life, and therefore has to have an opinion about every aspect of our life. And since the government has an opinion of every aspect of their life, now that we have groups fighting over what that opinion should be. But if you left it to free individuals to make those decisions, then we don't make different decisions. And as long as those decisions do not involve violating other people's rights, then who cares? I mean, even on the issue of trade, why is the government involved? I mean, other than an enemy country, why is the government involved? I want to trade with Cuba. You don't want to trade with Cuba. Don't buy Cuban stuff. I will. I do not want to trade with Cuba, so I should have used me as the example of the person who doesn't want to trade with Cuba. Cuba is not a threat to the individual rights of Americans. It's a threat to the individual rights of Cubans. So why is the government involved? No, because the government sets trade policy. Because it's decided that it protects industries, that it has an interest in this industry or that industry, in employment and economic growth. The government should have no interest in economic growth, no interest in trade, no interest in unemployment, no interest in wages. And in that case, it should leave trade, employment, growth, innovation, finance, business, wages to all of us. There's one in the news just today, yesterday, where the Fed has decided that it's going to tell banks they cannot buy back their stock, at least, and they get be capped in the dividends, they pay up. Now, why? Why is the Fed doing this? Well, because if the banks go bankrupt, the Fed is going to bail them out. And if the Fed is going to bail them out, then it's going to be interested in what they do on a day-to-day basis. It's going to be interested in how many dividends they pay, and they do the stock buyback and everything if they deplete capital, because the Fed is going to have to bail them out, taxpayers in a sense. You're going to have to bail these banks out. So once you introduce the government involvement in a particular aspect of the economy, a particular aspect of our lives, then it needs to be involved in other aspects of our lives. Because everything's connected. They have impact on one another. And there's no end to it. There's no end to it. If the government provides deposit insurance to banks, then they have to make sure the banks aren't making risky loans. To make sure they're not making risky loans, they have to have regulators come in and evaluate those loans. And then if they're going to bail them out because they're too big to fail, then they have to make sure that they have enough capital. So they have capital constraints. But then they have to make sure that in a time of crisis, the capital doesn't get depleted to such an extent that they have constraints of dividends and constraints of stock buybacks. And it goes on and on and on. And soon enough, banks are basically run by the government, which is what the situation is today. Banks are basically a public utility. They're run by government bureaucrats. They're not run by the banks. Do you know, I don't know if I think I've told you this, but every day, in America, in American banks, hundreds of government bureaucrats go to work in the banks, at the banks. So JP Morgan Chase has like 120 regulators who actually have offices in the JP Morgan Chase building in New York. They actually literally sit next to, in offices near the executives, to sign off on their decisions. That's what a mixed economy does. They sit there and regulate and control and limit and oversee everything that these businesses do. But that's inevitable. Once the government enters those businesses, it's their responsibility. And of course, once the government has control over the currency, of course, once the government has control over the money, then through that, well, it needs to control how we use the money. And it just goes on and on and on and on. Let me just say, just because this is going on in a chat and the people, whoever this guy is completely misrepresenting objectivism. And I'll just mention this issue quickly and we'll go on for it. But objectivism does not consider homosexuality immoral. Leonard Peikoff was very clear about that. And Ayn Rand never condemned it morally. And there's nobody I know among objectivist intellectuals, from Ayn Rand to Leonard Peikoff to anybody else, who thinks that homosexuality is immoral. So you guys want to invent your own form of objectivism that's unrelated to Ayn Rand? You are then in David Kelly's world because you're making up objectivism. You're making up whatever you want objectivism to be. She said it was disgusting. She did not say it was immoral. And there's plenty of witnesses for that. So you can make stuff up. You can pretend. You can invent stuff. And by the way, yeah, it was in a Q&A. And even there, she could be wrong. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Why not? There's nothing to lose from doing that. There we go. Put him in timeout because I don't like people using my chat to misrepresent objectivism. I mean, it's one thing to attack me. That's fine. You can attack me. But to misrepresent the ideas, to just keep going at it by misrepresenting the ideas. Plus, he was misrepresenting my views on immigration, my views on Islam, my views on all this stuff. It's a hobby of these guys. And it's interesting that it's kind of, they have this particular racist approach, and then that dictates everything else that they have to abide by. All right, let's see. So anything else with regard to politicize? So I'd say there's the primary thing that drives politicization is the mixed economy, is the fact that government is involved where it shouldn't be involved. And that creates all kinds of perverse incentives for people to take stands on things that they theoretically should have, that the government should have no say in. And then, then what that does is it creates pressure groups. Well, if the government's going to be involved in trade, then I want to be in the steel side. So I'm going to lobby for steel tariffs to protect my job. But then the other guy is going to be wanting to protect his auto job, and he's going to want steel tariffs to be lower. And somebody else is going to want, do you know why we have really, really, really big constraints on the importation of sugar into this country? Anybody know why there is the big constraints on importing sugar into the United States from like the Caribbean? Why is that? Well, you know, the most obvious response to that is because the people who grow sugar in the U.S., in Florida, have lobbied for that. They want to protect their ability to sell sugar into the U.S. market at really, really high prices. And that's true. But it's just, the sugar lobby is tiny. It's just those guys in Florida. It can't be that they have that much power. Well, it turns out that they have basically teamed up with the corn lobby. Now, corn is big. Corn is all over the Midwest. Corn controls multiple senators. Corn controls multiple swing states in the Midwest. From Ohio through Kansas and Nebraska, that whole area is corn growing country. And why does corn care about sugar? Because they want corn syrup. Indeed, in Coca-Cola has corn syrup in it, not sugar. Why? Because sugar's too expensive in the United States. So instead, we use corn syrup. And who wants to continue selling lots of corn syrup? The corn farmers in the Midwest. And of course, they want to keep tariffs on sugar high because sugar is actually cheaper than corn syrup in the global markets. If the United States just bought sugar in the world markets, the corn farmers would go out of business. We could easily import enough sugar to be able to facilitate all the Coca-Colas and at a cheaper price. So you can see how government's involvement in regulation creates all these gangs who are now going to fight over each other, over tariffs here, tariffs there, restrictions here, restrictions there, and it completely becomes gang warfare, and it becomes tribal. And of course, in the bigger picture, as the government is encroaching into every aspect of our lives, more and more of us get involved in politics. More and more of us care about politics. Whereas in a truly free market, politics is not that important. Voting is not that important. It's no big deal to vote or not to vote because politicians have very little power over our lives. I mean, people think that voting is the essence of the American system. Nah, voting's not that big of a deal. So, we all now get involved in politics. We all now care. And we can't all keep track of all these political issues. So we basically choose a side. We choose a tribe to support. And we go with Republican or we go with Democrat. And because we agree on some issues with them, we've done some thinking and we agree with some issues on them. But then we don't have time to look at all the issues. So we say, okay, well, if they're good on this stuff, let's assume they're good on everything else. But then we forget that we don't actually know the issues. We're just supporting them because we supported the party. And suddenly we become passionate supporters of these issues. So Republicans now are anti-trade. They used to be pro-trade, but now the party shifted because of Trump to anti-trade. And now they link anti-trade with anti-abortion, with anti-evolution, with replacing the monuments, with anti-climate change, and it becomes this package. And anti-masks. And if you wear a mask, then you must be pro-trade. You must be a globalist. Only globalists wear masks. And now, because we can't handle multiple categories, so we have two categories. You either belong to this team or that team. And here are the criteria for belonging to this team, and here are the criteria for belonging to this team. And there's nothing else. And basically what you get is these two political tribes. The one that wears masks and the one that doesn't wear masks. And you know all of their views, just based on that one characteristic, which is nuts and absurd. Somebody says, I don't think R is anti-trade, just anti-CCP. Right? That's why the Trump administration wants tariffs on European automobiles. That's why there was a big scandal big fight over tariffs on aluminum from Canada and steel from Canada. That's why they make a big deal out of trade with Mexico and the problems with trade in Mexico. Give me a frigging break. It has nothing to do with China. It's Canadian aluminum right now, but it used to be Canadian steel. Why are we, well, not just Canadian aluminum. What about Canadian wood? We have tariffs on Canadian wood that Republicans support. We have tariffs up the kazoo. It has nothing to do with China. China is just a convenience excuse. You keep taking, oh, it's about protecting intellectual property rights in China. Well, then why are you putting tariffs on something that comes from Europe? Why are you putting tariffs on French wine or on, Brazilian steel? Or Brazilian soybeans? No. Don't buy the rhetoric. Look at the actions. Look at what's actually going on. Republicans are anti-trade, as are, by the way, Democrats. So one thing Biden and Trump will completely agree on is they're both anti-trade. And Bernie Sanders is anti-trade more than Biden, right? The more left you go, the more anti-trade you go, because the more statist you go, because the more control you want, which is the same as the more right you go. The more control you want, the more statist you are, the more anti-trade you're going to be. Because trade is a great issue with which to control people. So, yeah, I mean, OMG says, Trump blames outsourcing to China and illegal immigration on depressing wages. Complete nonsense. And hurting the working class. Complete nonsense. Used to be Democratic platform. Now, Dems see immigrants as new voters. Yeah, it completely shifts. Why does government get involved in who comes to this country and who doesn't come to this country? As long as we're not importing crooks and criminals and terrorists and people who do harm, why is it any of their business who I invite to stay over with me? Who I invite to work for me? None of their business. Not violating anybody's rights. So, it's the more government get involved in our lives, the more issues they have to cover, the more tribal we become, the more we have to create a gang to fight for our interests, because the government is going to take those interests away. And that gang now becomes, maybe protects us on these interests, but it also is lobbying for a million other things. But we can't keep track of the million other things. We're part of the gang. We just go with the gang. So we have gang politics, tribal politics. And Ayn Rand talked about this a lot. If you go back to her essays in the 60s and 70s, she talks about a lot about how the mixed economy has to turn into gang warfare, which is tribal. And she constantly makes those connections. And now we're seeing it. We're seeing it on steroids. Seeing it on steroids. All right, let's turn to some of your super chat questions. Have you listened to NPR lately? Their obsession on race is disgusting. Only the Klan cares more about race than them. I agree. I haven't listened to NPR lately. I don't listen in Puerto Rico to NPR, only in California when I drive. But I'm not surprised, because the left, and I've done a few shows on this, and I did the show about white fragility, and you saw that there. Yeah, I mean, the left has become obsessed about race. The whole idea of systemic racism is not that it's in the system. It's the fact that by being white, you're a racist. And therefore, it's impossible to eliminate. It's always going to be with us. And it's systemic, because I can't get rid of the color of my skin. And they constantly, and they view the whole world through this prism. The whole world is viewed, every issue in the world is viewed through this prism of race, of skin color. And as I've said many, many times, the extreme left racist and the extreme right racist are the same. The white supremacists and the identity politics left are the same. There's no difference between them. It's just who they think is superior, who they think is better, who they think should be sacrificed to whom. But in terms of the principle, their view of the world through a racial prism, through a collectivist, barbaric, tribal, primitive, anti-reason prism. That's how they look at the world. Let's see. Have you heard or played the 2007 video game BioShock? It heavily features objectivist concepts and ideology through its story. You may like it. I don't do video games. I've never played video games. And my understanding of BioShock is it presents objectivism badly, and it presents objectivism as a failure, right? So it's not a game that I think interests me. I did a lot of interviews, radio interviews on BioShock when it first came out. You know, my son had played it and told me about it, so I knew a little bit about it. But, you know, and I read a bunch of stuff that the creator of BioShock actually wrote about BioShock and wrote about objectivism. And I did a bunch of interviews on it. So again, I think it's interesting. I think it got a lot of people to read Ayn Rand. I'm glad it's out there because I think it introduces a lot of people to the ideas. But let's be honest, it introduces them in a negative way. It does not have a positive view of objectivism. It has a negative view of objectivism. Are mask mandates the same as requirements to wear burqa, hijab in some societies? Aren't both based on the idea that people need to wear something to protect society from the threat they purportedly represent? No, I mean, it's not the same at all. It's not the same at all. There is a scientific reason to wear masks. There is a real threat. There is actually a virus. There's actually something that threatens you, and you potentially transmitting it to other people. And by wearing a mask, and if you are infected, the likelihood of you transmitting that virus to other people is reduced dramatically. And you getting it is reduced dramatically. The burqa, niqab, hijab has no basis in science. They have no basis in reality. And they make a certain assumption about human nature. They make the assumption that we cannot resist the sight of a woman's face. The consequence of seeing a woman's face is rape. And that is, you know, that is a evil, wrong assumption about human nature. It has no basis in reality. It has no basis in fact. And it doesn't, it assumes men are weak, dependent on, and assumes that the nature of women is to seduce. So it views men and women negatively. A mask is just now I don't, again, I'm not for mandates. Other than at the store level, and I think stores would mandate it, because it would make sense, it would make people feel comfortable, it would make people feel safe, and therefore people are more likely to come into the store to shop. But to compare it to burqas is just absurd. One is based on science and fact, and the other not. Now, if you deny that there is a virus, then you're denying reality. If you deny that the virus kills a lot of old people, you're denying reality. Now, to the extent that people interact with old people, there's a risk. Now, again, I think it should be voluntary, but I would wear a mask, and I would probably, I'd fight anybody not to wear a burqa. It's a completely different, one is a real threat, and one is a mystical, complete misrepresentation of human nature. But this is the problem, that everything becomes political. I'll give you an example, because this one pissed me off. So I get an email from a woman I knew a long time ago who was very pro-Israel, very conservative, very tough on foreign policy. So this woman was. And she used to come to all my kind of post 9/11 talks, and she used to love my talks about winning the unwinnable war. And she was also a John Bolton fan. John Bolton was very tough after 9/11, really good on these things, and really a good guy. Really good on what needed to be done to win the war. And she was a huge John Bolton fan. So I get an email from her 2 nights ago. And it says, I've just been sent this PDF of John Bolton's new book. Here it is. It's a gift. Pass it. Send it around. So I emailed her and I said, do you have a copyright for this? You're sending out somebody's book in PDF form. Do you have a copyright? And she sends me back this email thread. And the email thread basically is by a few people saying, hey, I've got a PDF of John Bolton's book. Let's send it to everybody we know so that nobody buys his book, so we suppress his sales. So we hurt John Bolton by sending out the PDF. So send it around. And I said to her, what are you doing? And she said, oh, John Bolton's a horrible man because he's attacking President Trump. And I went back to her and I said, it doesn't matter if he's a horrible man or not. You either believe in rights or you don't believe in rights. So now I have a PDF copy of John Bolton's book. Now I'm going to buy a book, but I bought the book as well, and I'm reading it now. It's actually quite interesting. It's definitely worth reading, in my view. But here's the hatred of Donald Trump. Take somebody who's generally conservative, pro-capitalist, pro-property rights, pro-even intellectual property rights. But now he went against the president. Poof, all that is out the window. Let's go get him. Let's destroy his property rights. How is this different? How is this different than smashing windows of stores, rioting in the streets? Because you're pissed off politically. They're the same as the left. There's no difference between the right and the left. It's pitchforks. It's violence. It's the destruction of property. It's so pissed me off. But it's that tribalism. And that lack of, doesn't matter. And there's nothing about the mask like a burqa or anything, but it's the tribe. Trump doesn't wear a mask. Nobody should wear a mask. Okay, I know you view Tucker Carlson as an enemy of freedom. He has consistently called out GOP and Trump as spineless cowards who are nowhere to be found in talking on BLM and Marxist nihilist mob. I think that's true, but he would also, my guess is that Tucker Carlson would also support sending the troops in, which I think would be wrong. Tucker Carlson has to be good about calling out BLM, about standing up to the nihilists intellectually. So I'll give him credit where credit is due. Tucker Carlson is willing to publicly stand up and fight against the racists on the left. But that isn't enough, in my view at least, to make up for all of his other failings, and particularly his nationalist conservatist views and his views on capitalism, his very, very anti-capitalist views. And plus, here's again somebody who is a federalist, unless, again, it goes against this tribe. Right? So he's a federalist. The state should take care of stuff. The states, everything should be the state's responsibility, except when it's the Democrats out in the streets, and now we want the federal government to take care of it. Right? Okay, let's go from the top. Trump today said he will likely lose to Biden. He said that. Wow, that's good. He's setting low expectation. It makes sense. He did that with Hillary as well. Since Trump hates to lose, what are the chances of a Pence-Haley or Haley-Pence last-minute replacement? Zero. I don't think Trump would step aside for that. Now, there was some talk about he would replace Pence with Haley. At least that's what John Bolton says. I saw that somewhere, that John Bolton thinks that that's why Haley left the UN to get ready, and that Trump had hinted that he's going to replace Pence. But Other people have told Trump that it's important to be loyal to the people who are loyal to you. So we'll see what happens. But I don't think there's any chance that Trump would actually step aside. I wish there was, because then I could get not excited, but I would vote for Pence, Haley over Biden. I would definitely vote for Haley, Pence over Biden. I just wouldn't vote for Trump. But it's unimaginable to you that Trump would step aside unless there was some health issue, or unless he could use health as an excuse if he's lost the passion for actually doing it. But I don't think he has, and I don't think he's ruled out winning. I think nobody thought, including him, I think that he could win against Hillary, and then he did win. Hey, Ron, congrats on a 20K. Thank you. 20K subscribers. I'm all stoned, and now we're going for the next one. I'm far from satisfied. Far from satisfied. Is a MS in economics worth it, or is it just a lot of nonsense calculus? I want to go into political consulting, political analysis, but I'm torn between public policy and MS in economics. I mean, I think MS in economics will give you some good tools. You'll have to, I mean, it also depends where you get it. I mean, if you got a George Mason, you would learn real economics. So I think it'd give you good tools. I'm not sure, I don't know, public policy, you'd learn anything more than you'd learn in economics. That is, public policy is full of BS. It's again, unless you learn it in some specific school that has a good program. But most public policy programs are leftist, mixed economy, government should do everything kind of places. So if you were looking for a rational curriculum, I would look at particular schools and then look at what the best discipline is. But if you're looking to go to the best school possible because you want to get, then it doesn't matter. In both cases, you'll get BS, and I think probably the economics is more useful than the public policy stuff. Any advice on watching Italian opera? I have trouble reading the subtitles and appreciating the music simultaneously. Good question. Here's my recommendation. Don't watch the opera. And don't watch a complete opera. Get a CD. I don't think CDs exist anymore. Download a highlights disc. Or download a particular singer singing greatest hits. Start with the greatest hits. And just listen to them. Don't even look at the words. Don't even try to figure out what they're singing. Just listen to the beautiful harmony and melody, to the passion being expressed, to the use of voice in conveying emotion, which is stunning, and no other form of singing comes even close. So pay attention to the music, the singing, the emotion that it conveys. Get used to it. And then when you're familiar and you find a particular aria, right? A particular aria. I'm kidding that CDs don't exist. I know they still exist, but people don't use them. They just download music, right? Find a particular aria that you like and then say, okay, what opera is this from? Oh, it's from Aida. And then try and maybe put a CD on or download the music for Aida and listen to it in the background. And then sit down and watch it. And before you watch it, this is another important thing. Before you watch it, read the story. You don't have to read the actual text. Read the story. So you know what's going to happen. So you're not overly focused on the plot. The plot of these operas is not very good. The plot of the operas is usually pretty bad. Stupid, dumb, uninteresting. What's interesting is how the plot is conveyed through music and through singing. So read the story in advance so you're not in suspense. Right? Like if you listen to Tristan and Isolde by Wagner, like there's a death scene. It lasts an hour. There's nothing to be in suspense about. They're both going to die. right? I'm giving you spoilers right now. It's not important. But the way it's conveyed, the beauty of the music, the tragedy is conveyed, the sadness, the emotion, that is what opera is about. Now, there are operas with better librettos, better stories, but most of them are like that. So that's my advice. Listen to highlights, best of, greatest hits kind of records. Then find an opera you really like, listen to the whole opera. Only then watch it, but before you watch it, read the story. And you can read the story when you get the music of the whole opera, read the story then, and then try to follow a little bit while you're listening to the opera. But only then go watch it. I love opera. Opera is, I don't know, it's the most absorbing of all the art forms for me. Because the music is so stunningly beautiful. And then you get a plot, and a good opera has great drama. And the staging, and if it's done well, it just comes together in a way that is just stunning. So I love opera. It might be my favorite art form in that in a sense. So, and I love to see it live. I'm not a big ballet fan. I never connected with ballet. So, I mean, that's just me. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with ballet. There's nothing. It's just me. But opera to me it's up there. Yeah, I wish movies sometimes reach and can affect me that way, but very, very little can affect me the way opera can. Are you comfortable with President Kamala Harris as president given Biden's death? She has supported reparations movement, Green New Deal, big government. Yeah, I'm not comfortable with anybody being president. I'm not comfortable with Kamala Harris being president. I'm not comfortable with Biden being president. I wasn't comfortable with Obama being president. And I'm certainly not comfortable with Trump being president. I haven't been comfortable with anybody being president since Reagan. And even then, I struggled. So, I mean, it's irrelevant who I'm comfortable being president with. The question is, on the long run prognosis for this country, if you care about the future freedom in this country, who will do the least long-term harm? They're all going to do harm. They're all going to be disasters. They're all going to move us towards closer to statism. But who will do the least long-term harm? I think with few exceptions, it's anybody but Trump. I think Trump does the most long-term harm. And I've explained why I think that in many different ways. So, and I'll explain it again because I think when I talk to Andy Bernstein, he's going to disagree with me. So we'll get into that next week. But is Kamala Harris going to do harm? Yes. Horrific harm. But long-term, to the prospects of freedom in this country, who's going to do more harm? I think Trump. But could I vote for Kamala Harris? No. And look, she can't get reparations passed. She can't get a Green New Deal. And you want to claim that Kamala Harris is for big government? What is Trump? We just did a $3 trillion stimulus package that Trump signed off on top of the highest government spending we've seen since the stimulus package under Obama. So this stimulus package is 3 times bigger than the Obama stimulus package. 3 times. So everybody, I don't know a single presidential candidate who's not pro-big government. And Kamala Harris is worse on big government than Trump? I doubt it. In terms of government spending, I doubt it. But my desire is, it probably won't, thank you, Frank. It probably won't be realized, but this is my desire. My desire would be that Trump lose in a landslide and Republicans hold the Senate and gain the House. I've always said, my ideal in the world in which we live today, my ideal government is a Democratic president and Republican House and Senate Remember that you can't do a Green New Deal without legislation, which has to go through the House and Senate. You can't do reparations without legislation, which you have to go through the House and Senate. So what I want is the Republicans to hold the House and the Senate, to hold the Senate and to gain the House. And I think Trump and the whole mentality of Trump needs to be crushed so that we never get tempted again. That's my idea, but nobody cares about what I think. I mean, people are offended by my views on who should be president as if I will be the person determining it, as if I have influence on voters to such an extent that I will be the pivot vote. The fact is that my vote doesn't matter. Your vote doesn't matter. Objectivists are not going to define who's going to win and who's not. Why get upset about my views on who's going to be president when it doesn't really affect the world? So, and it's not clear Biden will die in office. Certainly not in the first 4 years. Hey, he's old, but he's not that old, and people live well into their 90s now. So why would you suppose that? So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, and I'm not going to advocate for voting for anybody, except that I'm going to tell you my opinion on Donald Trump. And you get to decide whether he's so bad that you can't vote for him, he's so bad that you can't vote for him and you'll vote for Biden, or you won't vote at all, or whatever. You get to decide that. I don't determine who you vote for. So stop getting so upset that I have certain opinions about who should be president. I don't. Now, if I was the deciding vote, if I actually had 2 million followers or 10 million followers or 20 million followers, and therefore could actually dictate the direction of the vote, then it would be a different story. Then I can understand people getting upset. But that's not the reality. Not sure why the screen goes black every so often. If anybody has an idea, maybe the processor is still struggling in spite of me giving him support of all this RAM. Maybe it's still a processor issue, or maybe I need a eGPU, a separate graphics card. All right, we're running late. Meneses Moldberg gives 3 examples of sanctioned bad science: fiat currency, human neurological uniformity, and anthropogenic global warming. He notes you get more grant money for more alarmist results. Yeah, I mean, that's all true. I don't know who this person is, but it's certainly with global warming, that's true. But again, I'm not a scientist. This is part of the issue. People have these unbelievably strong beliefs about science, and I'm not a scientist. So, are human beings affecting warming or cooling of the planet? I don't know, but I don't rule it out. I'm more concerned about what people are offering as solutions. They're irrational, and they're nuts, and they're insane, and they would end civilization. But are we affecting climate? I don't know. And scientists I talk to, some scientists I talk to, rational scientists, think absolutely we are. Some scientists think, no, we're absolutely not. Almost no scientists think it's catastrophic, so that's good. So my view is, maybe we're affecting global warming. I don't think it's catastrophic. And in any case, none of the solutions I'm seeing being offered, other than nuclear power, are rational at all. So scrap those. Human neurological uniformity. I don't know anybody who actually believes that we're neurologically uniform. We're obviously not. All you have to look around and you can see we're not. I don't know if anybody quite holds it that way. Maybe. And by the way, I don't know why those are, it's interesting that those are the 3 bad sciences. There's so many examples of bad science. These are 3, but there are many, many, many others. A human neurological uniformity. We're not the same, but I'm not sure what the agenda there is. I'm scared to ask what the agenda of the opposite view of that. Yeah, every individual is different. I'm for individual non-uniformity. And fiat currency, yeah, fiat currency is an absolutely unmitigated disaster. And, but it's not science in the same, I mean, it's economics, which is a science, but not quite in the same sense. But you could example, all of Keynesianism is, it's not just fiat money, it's the whole science of economics is completely messed up and screwed up. There, the screen went black again. It comes back. I have no idea. If anybody has an idea why that is happening, and if you think it might be related to the processor being overcharged, maybe it's the conversion from something about the conversion from HDMI to USB. So anybody there who's technically live streams and stuff like this, who has an idea of why that might be happening, let me know. Let me know. So it's a video card, but I don't really have a video card. So it's a video card that's inside the computer, or it's this cam link which converts the HDMI signal to a USB signal for the computer. I might change the cam link and see if that helps. You think it's in the motherboard? If it's in the motherboard, then I have to get an external graphics card. It's an Intel chip. It's an Intel chip. All right, let's see. Why does the left seem to win every argument, even when Republicans are in power? Because the left has the moral high ground. Because the morality of the culture is altruism. And the left is not embarrassed to be all-out altruistic. The right tries to have its cake and eat it. It wants free markets which are inconsistent with altruism. It wants to love the founding fathers, which is inconsistent with altruism, because they're all about individual rights and the pursuit of happiness. It's because in every argument, ultimately the one who is morally consistent is going to win. And the left is morally consistent, and the right, when it's the better right, is completely morally confused and contradictory, and therefore folds. So they folded on the New Deal, they folded on the Great Society, they folded on environmental regulations, they folded on everything. On everything. So Jack says, have you thought about doing a show with Dan Wisanowski? I think it would be interesting to talk to him about sports and current events. Yeah, that would be fun. If you're in, I have lost all contact with Dan. So if you're in touch with Dan, if you want to suggest it to him and ask him if he'd be interested, yeah, that could be interesting. I don't know what his politics are these days. He's the announcer. He's the announcer for the San Jose Sharks, right, for hockey, ice hockey. But yeah, that would be fun just to get some. I don't know what his politics are. I can't remember. I mean, he was very friendly towards objectivism, considered himself an objectivist. I don't know if he still is. I have no idea. Right? That would be fun. All right. Thoughts on the Grateful Dead? Not much. I don't know. I don't like the whole the Dead heads. I didn't like the Grateful Dead's hippie San Francisco attitude. Their music is pretty good. I'm pro their music, but it's just that deadhead. Yeah, I mean, unthinking, kind of drugged out, hippie lifestyle. I reject, and I guess I rejected them with it. Maybe, and I never got into their music, but when I hear their music, I kind of like it. So glad I find objectivism and learned that politics is not a primary. Let us philosophers and philosophy lovers spread metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Yeah, but one of the ways to spread those things is through politics, because politics always boils down to ethics, epistemology, metaphysics. The only way to approach politics is by use of reason and attribution to facts. That's epistemology and metaphysics. And of course, the proper approach to politics is through a prism or through the moral view of individual rights, which is based on egoism. It can't be based on anything else. And you can't really talk about politics without bringing in both fact, reason, and egoism. So it's a tool to teach people about the deeper philosophy. I'm a small telecom. Government is throwing a lot of money at our sector for broadband stimulus. That's right. One of the parts of the stimulus package was picking winners and losers in the telecom business. All my companies are taking, all my competitors are taking the money. Is it immoral to take the money? Take the money or just retire? Well, I mean, I certainly understand if you want to retire. But if you don't want to retire, then I would take the money. You can't avoid it. I mean, the government's in this field. But if you feel dirty doing it, if you've achieved what you want to achieve in the sector, if you would be happy retired and you've got something else you want to do and can do, then I would retire and leave this mixed economy with, if they give you money, they also give you conditions and standards and intervene and, look at the banks, right? Ultimately, you'll be a public utility. So I can completely understand shrugging and retiring and leaving the sector. But it really is disgusting. And remember, this is under Trump administration. He didn't have to sign this bill. He didn't have to include support for telecom. But this is those Republicans that supposedly believe in free markets. Does immigration depress wages for certain sectors' jobs? At McDonald's, 1,000 people can do the work. Competitive pressure decreases wages. But high-skill immigration increases productivity and wages. How does high-skill immigration increase productivity and wages? In the same way that it does in McDonald's. So it is true that immigration depresses wages in certain sectors' jobs. Could be programming. It could be any sector. If there's a sector in which, you have people competing and suddenly you increase the supply, then wages will go down. Everything else held constant. But what happens over time? Well, because wages went down, profits went up, let's assume, right? Either profits go up or the price of products go down. If profits go up, companies have more money to invest. They invest. By investing, they increase productivity. More jobs are created. The productivity in the economy goes up. If competitive pressures don't allow profits to go up, then prices go down. Prices go down means people can buy cheaper goods, which means they can save more money, which is then invested in products, which ultimately leads to increases in productivity, which increases jobs, and ultimately wages across the economy go up. So while immigration might hurt wages in a particular sector for a particular time frame, over the long run, immigration increases wages, increases productivity, increases standard of living. And the economics on this are unequivocal. Now, there's even a question, and there's a study that was done in Miami when Cubans, you remember there was a mass immigration of Cubans into Miami at some point when Castro allowed them all to leave and we accepted them. There was a short period of time where just a mass of Cubans arrived in Miami. And they looked at low-income wages. And they actually, over the medium term, went up. Because more people working creates more demand, which creates more demand for goods, which creates more demand for labor, which ultimately results in wages staying flat or going up. So there is zero economic evidence that immigration depresses wages across the board. Again, in a particular sector, in a particular time, sure. And there's nothing in economics that differentiates between high-skill immigration and low-skill immigration. The question is, are there jobs for these people or not? Can they work? Are they willing to work? Are people willing to employ them? Again, there's nothing in economics, in the science of economics, that differentiates between low-skilled labor and high-skilled labor. That is a purely political distinction. Because, the truth is we don't like low-skilled labor because they don't typically, they don't look like us. It's motivated, always has been motivated by xenophobia. If you think about the first restrictions on immigration in America, the first restrictions on immigration in America were in the 1890s to restrict Chinese immigrants. Why? Well, the excuse was they were taking jobs away. But again, no evidence of that. Indeed, they did things in building the railroads that nobody else would be willing to do. They took risks. They were willing to work under conditions nobody else were willing to work. So they increased the productivity of America by creating a railroad, by building a railroad through some of the most treacherous terrain in the country. Their reward was banning immigration from China. More because we didn't like Chinese people than because of any economic impact they were having. Indeed, they helped build the railroads. Isn't that a good thing? Didn't that increase productivity in America overall? Didn't it make our jobs, increase wages, increase in the standard of living? Of course. You know, and then, of course, jobs, low skill jobs, that nobody's willing to do. Picking apples in Oregon. We're still not willing to bring in immigrants to do that. It has nothing to do with replacing anybody's job. Nobody's willing to do it in America. Not at a price that makes it profitable for the growers of apples to continue growing apples. But if they bring in temporary seasonal migrants from Mexico to pick the apples, they're willing to do it. But we're still not willing to permit that. It has nothing to do with low or high skill. It has to do with demand for labor. If there's no demand for labor, people won't immigrate here. Because what are they going to do if they can't work? How are they going to make a living? What did you think about Splash Mountain on Disney World being changed into a Princess and the Frog attraction because of racist allegations? I haven't heard of that. Why is Splash Mountain racist? I need more information. Why? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all these things are nuts, right? There's a million things that are happening out there that have to do with these kind of things that are complete nuts. The value of objectivity in reporting is beginning to be explicitly questioned. What are the effects of tribalism in the press? Huge. Now, the value of objectivity is not beginning to be explicitly questioned. It's been questioned for 20, 30, 40 years in journalism schools. It's always academia where the trouble really starts. That's where they go to learn how to be good journalists. And in journalism school, for years and years and years now, they've been taught that there is no such thing as objectivity. That is only the pretense of. That we don't know what's really in reality. You can't separate your views from the facts. So you might as well just reflect your views. And then your views become part of the tribe. Remember, journalists tend to be well-educated. Where do they get educated? Our universities. What are the universities teaching them? Postmodernism. There's no such thing as truth. There's no such thing as objective reality. And that the left's agenda is the right agenda. Don't worry about facts. Worry about the narrative. Worry about what you're trying to achieve. The ends justify the means. So yes, because they belong to the tribe of educated in our schools that have taught them that journalism is non-objective and they might as well go with the current views. Well, what current views are they? The views that their professors taught them, the views of the left. Can you speak on the distinction between teams, bands, organizations, and collectives? How is working together as groups fundamentally different from collectives? Is power in numbers or fear of being alone the attraction? Well, certainly there is power in numbers. No, the attraction is not having to think for yourself. The difference between a team and a collective, a team and a tribe, is a team is members who all have to contribute in some way their own thinking, their own ability. Think of a sports team. You have to do something well to be a member of a team. You have to rebound in a basketball. You have to be able to shoot the ball well, or pass the ball well, or dribble the ball well, or do something well. You have to be an individual contributor. You have to be able to think for yourself. You can't sit around the court waiting for the leader to tell you what to do. You have to be a thinker. You have to be independent. You have to be an individualist. The best teams are comprised of individualists. People who are good at making decisions for themselves. People who are good at executing for themselves. So teams are, good teams are teams of individuals, individualists. A tribe, a band, a collective is where you're placing other people's well-being above yourself, and you're looking for leadership. Somebody's leading you. It's motivated by feelings and emotions. It's about belonging. Yeah, the fear of being alone. The power in numbers. But what is the power of numbers? It's primarily emotional power. And I've talked about this in the past many times. I'm just going to do it briefly here because we're really running long here. When you undercut reason, when you undermine our means for knowing the world, we lose our confidence in our own ability to think and solve problems. When you teach people to rely on their emotions, not on their mind, then what you're cultivating is fear, insecurity. And when people are afraid and insecure and don't know how to use their minds, they're looking for answers. Then they look for somebody to tell them what those answers are. And the most primitive, easiest way to look for somebody to tell you what the answers are is to look for people who look like you, who make you feel good, who share some superficial similarity. And that's how you form tribes. And that's how tribes are formed. So those are tribes. I think bands is the same thing. And collectives is a group of people who the purpose of their functioning as individuals is the good of the collective, is the good of the group. Teams is fine. Organizations is fine. Again, organizations are formed by individuals. And successful organizations are organizations that cultivate individualism, individual thinking, individual contribution, individual success, individual prospering. They don't undermine it. Collectives undermine it because the purpose now is not the individual, the purpose is the collective. Can you gain self-esteem from the way you interact with other people? Can you gain self-esteem? No, not fundamentally. I mean, the only sense in which, if that is your profession, so for example, if you're a doctor, part of gaining self-esteem is doing a good job. And if you do a good job as a doctor, it means interacting with other people. Or a teacher. You gain your self-esteem by doing a good job. What does that job entail? It entails interacting with other people. So only to the extent that your job, your values, the things you're striving to achieve entail other people. You know, have you been successful in trading with them? But the essential is not the other people. The essential is the values. The essential is your actions. That's where the self-esteem comes from. What about welfare and immigration of immigrants having 8 kids? Original citizens affected by feminism have 0 to 2 kids. Original people and values vanish through noble idealism. So what? Why are the original people of value? Who cares about original people? What's the value of original people? And if the values are valuable, then the whole point is to teach the immigrants those values and for them to adopt them. That's what the melting pot meant. That's what America used to be. Who are the original Americans? I don't know. The Mayflower, the group that arrived on the Mayflower, but they had lousy values, the people who came on the Mayflower. They established communism in New England. Is that the original values? Are those the original people? Or maybe the original values are the Founding Fathers' values. That's how I'd like to see it. But who are the original people? Only heirs of the Founding Fathers? What about all the immigrants who came? The millions and millions of immigrants who adopted those values, who had 8 kids. I mean, if you believe the values are good values, then teach them. promote them, encourage them. Now, the problem today is not immigration. The problem today is multiculturalism. The problem today is our universities. The problem today are our teachers. The problem today is our schools that undermine the original values. It's not the immigrants. It's Americans who've lived here for generations, who have shitty ideas, teaching immigrants the shitty ideas instead of the good ideas, the valuable values. But who the heck cares about original people? This is the xenophobia. This is the easily become the kind of racism. Who cares who the original people were? Were the slaves who came here, were they original people? They were here when the founding fathers were here. Does that count? Or does the fact that they were slaves don't count as original people? The whole framing is so collectivistic. It's all about the values. It's all about ideas. Anybody can accept these ideas. Anybody can accept these ideas. The ideas, the values are universal. And when we believed that, we were a good country. But if you believe the ideas are only for white people, or for original Americans, whatever that means, then you've lost what those ideas actually mean. I don't employ any, well, I do. I don't know how many original Americans I employ. I've never thought about it in those terms. But I'm not an original American. I don't know how many generations you have to be here to count as an original American. I know more about America than almost anybody I know about the value of America. More than, and is it more valuable to be an original American or to have chosen America as the place you want to come to? So the whole framing of it is wrong. The whole attitude is wrong. If America holds on to the values of individualism, freedom, the primacy of reason, then why then do we treat other people as groups? The values that America represents are values that anybody can embrace. Anybody can embrace. And therefore, our job as original Americans is to teach them about those values, to help them embrace those values, to teach them why they're life-affirming values, why they're the good values, why they're the right values, why they're the just values. We don't even do that to our own kids, the heirs of original Americans. So before we deal with immigration, let's deal with education. That's where the real problem is. And I don't think people have 0 to 2 kids because of feminism. People have 0 to 2 kids because kids are a lot of work. Huge amount of energy required. Huge amount of investment required. And people have lives. And people have lots of ways in the modern world to enjoy those lives. And they don't want kids to consume their entire life. Like they did when you had 8 kids. You had 8 kids because that's all you could do in life. There was nothing else to do. Now, there's a gazillion things to do. So kids just become one value, not the only value. That's the difference. All right, we're almost at a 2-hour show, but I don't want to create a precedent of a 2-hour show. And since there are no more Super Chat questions, thank you. And please no more. Then we're going to cut it here. Again, great day. We made 20,000 subscribers today. And I think we're going to get a lot more going forward. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all the Super Chatters today. There were a few very generous Super Chatters. Even without Vonda being here, we got some good contributions. Please continue. It's how we fund this show and we make it possible. It's how I make possible, whether it's the equipment and the people who are assisting me, or Christian who cuts the videos and splices them and puts stuff together. All of that costs money, and you make it possible through Super Chat, through supporting the show and Yaron Brook Show. .com/support. Please do that, or Subscribestar, or Patreon, or Locals. All of those are good. So please Continue to subscribe. I particularly love the subscriptions because then I know exactly what's coming every month, and I know what I can expect in the future. So thank you, everybody. Keep liking the shows. Keep sharing the shows. This is how we really get the word out, is by having people participate, share in the shows, listen to them, and hopefully discover Ayn Rand because of them, because that is a big part of the goal here. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's a Q&A show, 8 p.m. tomorrow night. It's a Q&A show with the supporters who support the show at $25 a month or more. And, of course, Super Chat will be available as well. So thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you